is typically a pretty wet season for us here in Pennsylvania, making it the ideal weather for slugs. Slugs are primarily made of water, and so they really like to feed in moist and wet environments. Slugs like to feed on the tender leaves of plants, putting your youngest seedlings at risk. If you see leaves that have irregular shaped holes or even big portions of leaves missing that look like something took a bite out of your plant, you probably have slug damage. What you want to do is go down to your garden first thing in the morning and check the underside of the leaves for the bugs, as well as around the base of the plant. These insects like to feed overnight, so going first thing in the morning is when you'll have the best chance catching them in the act. Once you've confirmed that the slugs are the culprits to your damage, there are several organic methods you can use to lessen the population. I say lessen the population because you're never gonna ever get rid of all of the slugs, but you can make it so that you have a manageable amount in your garden. Today we're going to talk about 6 different methods that you can use, starting from what I found to be the least effective to the most effective. The first option is designating some of your plants as sacrificial plants. If you particularly notice a lot of slug damage on a couple of plants, you can leave those plants there and tackle the slugs in the rest of your garden first. Obviously, this requires you to have at least 2 things that you're doing at once, having sacrificial plants and using one of the other methods I'm going to talk about, but it is an option. I also know that some people right at the start of the season will plant a specific area of plants that they know that they're going to designate as the slug area, and I'm not sure if this works. To me, it sounds like you could still potentially have a slug problem, but that is an option. The second option is to use coffee grounds. Slugs do not like the smell of the coffee grounds, so if you put them around the base of your plant, the slugs will avoid damaging your plant. I found this to be effective for a very short period of time because the coffee grounds have a tendency to lose their smell fairly quickly. Number 3 on the list is beer traps. Now, if you've ever done any search on Google about dealing with slugs organically, you've probably found beer traps as an option. I had almost 0 success with this method. The idea is what you do is you take a container and you dig a hole in your garden bed where you're having the issue about the size of the container. You want the container to be level with the soil level, and then you fill it with beer. The slugs are attracted to the yeast, and so they go and they crawl into the liquid and they drown. When I used this method, I caught more earthworms than I did slugs, and even then it was only a couple of slugs. So for me, this method didn't seem worth it, and it didn't seem like it was working. I also don't want to hurt any beneficial insects if I can prevent it and find better methods, and so this is an option that I personally do not use, but a lot of people have had success with it, so I wanted to include it in the list because one of you might find it to be helpful. The other thing that I've heard about using beer traps is that the yeast can actually attract more slugs to your garden, and so that's another reason why I'm choosing not to use that method. The fourth option is to use crushed eggshells. The slugs don't like their soft body to touch the sharp edges of the eggshells, so what you do is you put the eggshells in a high concentration around the base of your plant. If you don't have enough eggshells around the base of your plant, they'll find a way to get around them and climb up the stem of your plant. To prepare the eggshells, what you want to do is put the shells on a baking sheet, then place them in the oven at 350 for 5 minutes. Make sure that you set a timer because I can guarantee you're going to forget about them. But once they're done, let them cool and then crush them just using your hands. The reason for putting them in the oven is just to make the shells more brittle and easier to crush. We are down to the top 2 in the list. These 2 methods are the methods that I primarily use in combination with the crushed eggshells. So option number 5 is to use some type of copper. You can buy copper collars, you can buy copper tape, you can buy mesh, but what happens is that the slugs have a chemical reaction with this copper, and it's similar to a shock for us, and so they will avoid touching the copper. And the idea is that you put this copper around the base of your plant so that the slugs won't even want to cross that barrier. I found this method to be extremely effective for the large slugs. I purchased some copper wire mesh on Amazon. It came in a roll, and what I did is I cut it up into tiny squares. I then cut a slit into those squares and then placed it around the base of my plant. What I found is that the tiny baby slugs were able to fit through that center hole of where I had made the slit. But other than that, I had a lot of success with this. But I do believe that part of my success was combining this with the 6 method. Now, the 6 method is to hand pick. Don't hate me. Yes, this is not necessarily the most efficient way, but it is the most effective. So what I did is I came down to my garden and I handpicked slugs every single morning for an entire week. This took me about 30 minutes to an hour every single day, so I would have to set that time aside before I went to work, but it was extremely effective. And after that 1 week of hand picking, my slug population was reduced to a manageable size where now I don't even have to do anything. All I'm doing is hand picking when I see them, but it's not nearly as bad as what it was. I will say that anytime that I'm planting a new seedling in my garden this year, I'm putting some type of copper around it at first until it gets pretty big, and then I will remove that copper and let it grow normally with some mulch around it. If you go the method of hand picking the slugs off of your plants, you want to put them in soapy water. This is to drown the slugs and keep them from going back into your garden. I like to use a red Solo cup because what I have found is that the slugs will try to climb out of the cup. So you definitely want to keep an eye on it and make sure they aren't trying to get out. The last thing I want to talk about is slug prevention. The most important thing is to never put compost in your garden that is not fully decomposed. This is the critical mistake that I made this year, and it is the reason that I believe I've had so many slugs this year. I was a little bit antsy this spring about getting my garden started, so I went ahead and took some compost from our bin that wasn't fully decomposed. Slugs also like to feed on decaying material, so not only do they like to feed on the tender leaves of your plants, but they love decaying material, and I created the perfect environment for them. I had decaying material in my bed as well as young seedlings there for them to feed on. So that's the first tip. The second tip is to only water in the mornings. If you water in the evenings, this creates the ideal environment for slugs. Remember, they like to feed at night and they like wet and moist environments. So by watering in the evenings, you are creating that environment for them. And then the third tip would to be keep your garden tidy. This can be difficult as a gardener because you're always running down to your garden every single day and you're doing work. But if you leave things like shovels, boards, rocks laying around in your garden, this is the perfect place for slugs to hide during the day. They obviously do not like the sun because they are primarily made of water, and so they will hide under those surfaces during the day and come out to feed at night. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video to be helpful. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to click the thumbs up. Also, if you have other suggestions for how to get rid of slugs, I would love to hear about them in the comments, so make sure to leave a comment below. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.